for whom this is new, you need to know that in the area here, the Galisteo Basin, there is proven oil and natural gas. And as the price at the pump continues to go up, which is more likely than seeing it ever go down, the pressures to turn this part of New Mexico into something you may not like will grow.
Are we looking at reserves underneath the richest Farmington area?
You will never hear an oil and gas company go to Santa Fe or to the federal government and say, well, there's just marginal production there. It's always a barn burner. And they're going to make the federal government and the state government rich.
Yeah, I'd just like to say something about the oil potential. One of the things people ought to think about is that we're not just talking about this area, it's really the Rio Grande Rift. So there's, in theory, there's oil and gas potential all up and down the Rio Grande. And in fact, the company that's drilling in this area, I believe, is drilling west of Albuquerque. So, the reason a rift is interesting is that, the ground splits apart like that big rift in Africa, and then it fills with sediments. So you can get that oil and gas building up in those sediments. And if, for some reason, the oil and gas is trapped there, then you actually may have the potential for commercial oil and gas. And I guess in a lot of this place, there's some sort of shale that may be trapping the stuff, so that's what they're looking for. Sometimes they compare this area to the San Juan Basin.
So the only oil well is, it's down on Cash Ranch Road. We were down there when they reopened it with their armed guards, believe it or not. And they were real spooky guys when they opened this thing up. And it was a well that was only, it was one of the ones from the 80s. Actually, we have one on our property, a dry capped off well, and there's 6 or 7 in the area. They only had one where they found the oil, and they were only able to get it, as far as I know, even back then, 7 or 8 gallons a day out of it, which didn't make it worthwhile. I don't even know at this point if that is a viable well. The footprint, even reopening a well, probably they destroyed about 25, 30, 40 acres, if I count the roads that they put in just for one well. And that was one they didn't even have to drill, they just had to reopen it. So it is a mess. Does anybody know which acreage is under lease by this company? There's supposed to be almost 60,000 acres under lease. Does anybody know where that land is and what land it is?
The Ortiz land grant.
Is it only the Ortiz land grant?
It's the Ortiz land grant. That's the big part. And then there's state land that's leased. And then we just assume there's other private leases. One thing that I learned researching the old wells is they did find oil and gas in several of them. They kept Farrell number 1 going, but they actually found oil and gas in lots of them.
Talk about governmental structures, we need to look at the county structure because the county can still do a lot with this. Not essentially from a constitutional basis, but from creating its own constitution. There's a group called CELDF that's worked with 400 communities now in Pennsylvania that have created their own constitutions against corporations working within their communities. Federal government is probably totally lost, as Tweety alluded to. State government is so easily bought off by corporations that it's probably lost. The county structure is where we have some power still. There's only 5 guys, and we have a profound ability to determine who gets elected, and we can talk to them. I think Jack Kochmeyer has already come out progressively on this issue, so he does need backup. I think that was on your website, right? But we can formulate laws in this county that will have to go through a state test. But CELDF helps communities to formulate those laws. And they're laws that corporations right now don't like to come up against because they put about 7 different rings that corporations have to work through, that corporations have to establish the fact that they have more constitutional rights than we do as people. And they don't like to do that. And then the judge, if they decide against us as a community, has to also determine that corporations do enjoy a special status under U.S. law. And right now, there's kind of, the corporations are kind of waiting to see what to do. And they've talked to the people in CELDF and they've said, you guys have us in an interesting position. We're waiting to see. So we do have power at the county level, and we should remember that.
Introduce myself, I'm Dan Capper. I live in the Lone Butte area, but I'm a retired petroleum engineer. I spent 25 years doing what these guys are doing in Alaska, of all places. And my Alaskan experience is you can block it. You can make the difference. You can change their development from the get-go. How they drill their wells, how many roads they can drill or pave. I mean, they did in Alaska, they shut down the pipeline for 7 years. And the development, the rules of development in Alaska are the most rigid in the world. Some environmentalists still don't think it's rigid enough, but trust me, they're the most rigid in the world. And people made them do it. We can make them do it. That's my only point.
Thank you.
How do we find out who currently owns the mineral rights on our properties?
That's not easy. That's not easy. That's a maze.
But I think it's
You'd have
important.
to hire an attorney.
I mean, I would like to have a name and a face. you know.
Now, generally, you're going to, excuse me, my name is Johnny McCoo. You have to go through an abstract company, you probably have to have an attorney. If, like our property, we don't even know, it's so complicated.
Do you know if,
Except for the,
I can tell you, in the Santa Fe area, you have a little bit more of a problem than San Juan because we weren't settled until the late 1880s. You guys were settled in the 1600s and land grants and all that, but he's totally correct. You have to do mineral research, and it is so complex. It's much of New Mexico, especially in the land grant areas and the old settled areas, very, very difficult.
Well, what was interesting in the article today was that there were 2 companies that were named that were brokering for whoever.
Yeah, how do they know?
Yeah. Well, and you probably won't know until they file for their first permit and they put the lease in their name. If they think it's gonna be anything good, the wildcatters always come in first. And, am I correct? If I'm correct, not correct, you tell me, but, and then the big boys come in and buy them out.
So,
But they're broke, somebody's broke, right?
What's your email address, number one? Are you drilling Santa Fe?
yes, I'm
what?
Johnny McCoo with Drilling Santa Fe.
Oh, okay.
And you can see Drilling Santa Fe at earthlink.net. Once we schedule another meeting, we'll let you know. What we're going to do first is, this is a great opportunity for Santa Fe County to take the lead in the state of New Mexico to have the best regulations, just what he was speaking about.
I'm glad to hear, John, you said what you did about regulations, because you cannot be against resource development, because the resources of the state pay a shitload of money and that reduce our taxes. I mean, there's a huge multi-billion, billion dollar trust fund that's funded by oil and gas revenues in the state that pay for schools, all kinds of programs. So if you go anti-resource development, you're not going to get anywhere.
We put it as our mission statement to protect the cultural, environmental, and economic resources of Santa Fe County. If Tecton wants to come in and drill right in an aquifer and then there's a chance of running that aquifer, we have to have regulations that say that's not allowable. Archaeological sites, and also the economic impact. You can, when you start coming in with this infrastructure, you bring in outside labor, you have road use, you have a lot of expense. You have schools, police protection, housing. It can change the community if it goes large scale. We don't know if it's going to go large scale. We don't know, like Tweety was pointing out, whether Tecton is just promoting this pie in the sky. But when I spoke to Chris Christensen, Vice President of Production Engineering at Tecton LLC, he was talking about layers of sweet fruit. He was talking about what a big play this was, and that this is going to be the next San Juan Basin. And we don't want to be the next San Juan Basin.